February 19th, 1986. Barry Seal, the man who smuggled 56 tons of cocaine for Pablo Escobar, reaches for the door handle. 3 Colombian assassins step from the shadows, and in 3 seconds, they pump 80 bullets through his windshield. Blood sprays across federal documents that would have convicted Pablo Escobar. But here's the insane part. Everyone knew this would happen. The DEA begged the judge to protect him, and the FBI warned of incoming hitmen. Even Seal knew. He'd given away $150,000 to his kids days earlier, saying, when, not if. 6 months ago, this 300-pound pilot was Pablo Escobar's favorite smuggler, moving 56 tons of cocaine. Then the CIA turned him, made him photograph Escobar with Nicaraguan communists. Those photos reached Reagan's desk, and then someone leaked them to the press. Barry Seal had just become the only man who could destroy both the Medellín Cartel and expose the CIA's drug operations. Both wanted him silenced. But who pulled the trigger first? And why did Washington sacrifice their best informant? Adler Berriman Barry Seal got his pilot's license on July 16, 1955, his 16th birthday. While other kids drove their father's Chevy to prom, Seal flew a Piper Cub to his. By age 26, he became Transworld Airlines' youngest 747 captain, commanding flights from JFK to Rome with 400 people aboard. His TWA supervisor, Bob Jura, watched Seal hand-fly a 747 through a thunderstorm over the Atlantic without breaking a sweat after a close encounter with the death. But the $160,000 annual salary wasn't enough. Neither was the prestige. Seal needed danger the way most people need oxygen. July 1976 marked the turn. Seal smuggled his first load, 700 pounds of Jamaican marijuana, in a borrowed Piper Aztec. The profit was $35,000 for 4 hours' work. TWA fired him in 1974 after an explosives charge, later dropped. But Seal had already found his calling. By 1979, he owned 3 planes and ran loads weekly. Then came the cocaine. Jorge Ochoa approached him personally in December 1980 at a Miami marina. The Medellín Cartel needed someone who could move serious weight, 1,000 kilos minimum per flight, and Ochoa offered $1 million per run. Seal accepted before Ochoa finished talking and took his first cocaine flight on March 24, 1981, carrying 1,200 kilos from Colombia to Louisiana. He flew at 180 feet over the Gulf of Mexico, below radar, burning through fuel at a rate that would panic any normal pilot. Seal had retrofitted extra tanks that gave him 7 hours of flight time. He knew every radar installation from Barranquilla to Brownsville. At 500 feet altitude and 120 knots, his twin-engine Aerostar mimicked helicopter signatures on DEA screens. Controllers dismissed him as another oil platform shuttle. The money became absurd. Seal earned $1.5 million per flight by 1982, flying twice monthly. He bought a 6,000 square foot house in Baton Rouge, a Learjet, 6 sports cars, and stashed $25 million in Grand Cayman banks. But here's what made him irreplaceable to Escobar. Seal never lost a load, not a single one. Other pilots crashed, got intercepted, or stole products. But Seal delivered every gram, every time. His secret? Military precision. He studied weather patterns 6 days in advance, memorized DEA shift changes at regional airports, and maintained 3 separate flight plans for every run. If turbulence hit over Honduras, he'd drop to wave height. If radar locked on near Cancun, he'd land at one of 14 private strips he'd scouted across Central America. The cartel called him El Gordo, not just for his 300-pound frame, but because he made everyone rich. Carlos later, Escobar's transport chief, said Seal moved more weight in 1982 than the cartel's entire Bahamian fleet combined. The Ochoa brothers gave him a gold Rolex inscribed, "To Barry, 1,000 flights, 1,000 successes." It was actually 143 flights, but who was counting? Each journey pumped enough cocaine into America to supply Miami for a month. DEA agent Ernst Jacobson later testified that Seal single-handedly caused cocaine prices to drop 30% nationwide between 1981 and 1983. One man, flying alone, had shifted the entire drug economy. But the question wasn't if he'd get caught, it was which agency would catch him first. The DEA, FBI, and Customs all had active files on Adler B. Seal by January 1983. What none of them knew was that another agency had been watching Seal for 2 years. Which three-letter agency needed a pilot who could fly anything anywhere without asking questions? And why did Seal's arrest in 1984 happen at an airport owned by that very same agency? March 5, 1984, Fort Lauderdale Executive Airport. DEA agents surrounded Seal's C-123K cargo plane, the same aircraft that would later crash in Nicaragua carrying CIA weapons for the Contras. Inside the hidden compartments, 462 pounds of uncut Colombian cocaine worth $34 million. Seal stepped out with his hands raised and a grin on his face. Gentlemen, you just caught the biggest fish in the Caribbean. The question is, what are you willing to pay for the whole ocean? Agent Ernst Jacobson arrested Seal but immediately recognized the opportunity. Seal knew names, routes, bank accounts, and bribes from Bogota to Boston. More importantly, Pablo Escobar still knew him only as Ellis Mackenzie, an alias Seal had used since 1981. The cartel's communication system, primitive radio networks, and coded phone calls meant news of arrests traveled slowly. If they moved fast, Seal could return to Colombia before anyone noticed. Within 72 hours, Seal sat in a Washington, D.C. office signing a cooperation agreement. The terms were easy: work undercover for the DEA in exchange for a suspended sentence. The government would seize his planes but let him buy them back through a shell company. To the cartel, it would look like business as usual. The CIA entered the picture through Vice President George Bush's task force on drugs. They needed evidence that the Sandinista government in Nicaragua was trafficking cocaine, proof that would justify congressional funding for the Contras. Seal's mission expanded from drug enforcement to Cold War intelligence gathering. 2 agencies, 1 asset, and a plan that required photographing communist officials with cocaine. The DEA installed 2 hidden cameras in Seal's plane, a 35mm Nikon triggered by a button on his steering yoke, and a video camera behind the cockpit bulkhead. CIA technicians added encrypted radio equipment that cost $875,000, more than the plane itself. June 25, 1984. Seal flew to Nicaragua's Los Brasiles military airfield, 25 kilometers northwest of Managua. Federico Vaughn, a Sandinista official, supervised the loading. Pablo Escobar arrived in a separate plane with Carlos later. Here's where Seal's genius showed. He complained about the plane feeling tail-heavy and insisted on supervising the weight distribution. This gave him an excuse to walk around clicking photos while pretending to check balance calculations. He captured Escobar holding a duffel bag of cocaine. He photographed Vaughn counting money with later. Most crucially, he got clear shots of Nicaraguan military personnel guarding the operation. Seal flew out with 1,500 kilos of cocaine and enough photographic evidence to prove the Sandinista cartel connection. The DEA called it the intelligence coup of the decade. But intelligence has a hierarchy, and Barry Seal had just become too valuable for mere drug enforcement. Someone in Washington decided these photos were worth more as propaganda than evidence. Who made that decision? And why did they value embarrassing Nicaragua over protecting the man who risked everything to take those pictures? July 1st, 1984. Colonel Oliver North sees Seal's photographs in a secure room at the old executive office building. The images were perfect. Pablo Escobar and Nicaraguan officials handling cocaine together, with military aircraft visible in the background. North immediately classified them as strategic intelligence assets. Within 48 hours, he briefed CIA Director William Casey. Within 72 hours, the photos landed on President Reagan's desk. The administration had been struggling to convince Congress to fund the Contras, Nicaraguan rebels fighting the Sandinista government. But these photos changed everything. Here was proof that America's enemies were drug traffickers. Reagan wanted to use the photos immediately in a nationally televised speech. The DEA objected violently, revealing the photos would burn Seal and destroy ongoing operations against the cartel. DEA Administrator Francis Mullen personally flew to Washington to protest. He warned North that exposure meant certain death for Seal. North's response, according to declassified documents, sometimes individual sacrifices serve larger national interests. The CIA backed North. They argued the propaganda value outweighed one informant's safety. Director Casey reportedly said, "We can't let operational timidity handicap foreign policy." And that's how the DEA lost the argument. July 17, 1984. Barry Seal bought a Washington Times at a Baton Rouge newsstand. The headline, "Sandinistas Deal in Cocaine, U.S. Finds." Below it, his photograph of Escobar at Los Brasiles airfield, his coffee mug shattered on the pavement. The article by reporter Edmund Jacoby cited high-level administration sources and described details only Seal could have known. Though his name wasn't printed, any cartel member with a functioning brain would connect these dots. Seal drove straight to his DEA handler's house. Agent Jacobson found him sitting in his car, newspaper in his lap, crying. "They killed me," Seal said. The Medellín Cartel's response was swift. Within 12 hours, they placed a $500,000 bounty on Ellis McKenzie. Within 24 hours, they discovered McKenzie was Barry Seal. Jorge Ochoa personally raised the bounty to $1 million. Escobar, furious about the photos, added another $500,000 from his personal funds. Every sicario from Cali to Caracas received Seal's photo and home address. The DEA immediately offered witness protection. New identity, new city, new life, and complete disappearance, but Seal refused. He had 2 sons in high school, a daughter in college, and a wife who wouldn't leave Louisiana. Plus, Seal believed he could handle himself. He'd survived 143 drug runs through hostile territory. He carried a .45 automatic and a .38 snub-nose. His house had motion sensors and reinforced doors. What could a few Colombian hitmen do that the entire DEA hadn't? From October 1984 to February 1985, Seal testified before 3 federal grand juries, providing evidence that indicted 59 major traffickers. His testimony convicted Carlos Lader, who got life plus 135 years. It helped build the case that would eventually corner Pablo Escobar. But every court appearance meant public exposure. Every testimony created new enemies. Seal was simultaneously the most valuable and most vulnerable witness in America. The Justice Department assigned him intermittent security, and that was the key word, intermittent. Budget constraints meant protection only during high-threat periods. The problem? Every period was high threat when you had $1 million price on your head. Who decided Barry Seal could survive part-time protection? And why did a Louisiana judge ignore federal warnings about the halfway house arrangement that would become Seal's death trap? Judge Frank Polozola of Louisiana's Middle District Court had a reputation. Appointed by Reagan in 1980, he believed in visible justice, making examples of criminals through public punishment. When Barry Seal appeared for sentencing on December 20, 1985, prosecutors expected probation. Seal's cooperation had been unprecedented. DEA Supervisor Kenneth Kennedy testified that Seal was the most important witness in the history of the Drug Enforcement Administration. Federal prosecutor Stanford Bardwell requested no jail time, citing ongoing investigations that required Seal's testimony. But Judge Polozola had other ideas. "Mr. Seal, you imported tons of poison into our communities," Polozola began. "Your cooperation, while valuable, doesn't erase your crimes." The sentence was 5 years probation and 6 months at a Salvation Army halfway house. Not house arrest at Seal's fortified home, a public halfway house with no security, no gates, and a fixed schedule, and not gonna lie, researching this video, we all thought that this judge was paid by Escobar. Seal's attorney, Louis Unglesby, immediately objected. "Your Honor, this is a death sentence." The Medellín Cartel knows Mr. Seal's identity. A halfway house makes him a sitting duck, but Polozola didn't care. He knew he was giving a death sentence to Barry Seal. Later it began, At the Salvation Army Community Treatment Center sat at 8401 Airline Highway in Baton Rouge, a two-story brick building between a liquor store and a used car lot. No security guards, no metal detectors, and a chain-link fence that anyone could climb in 4 seconds. Residents had to sign in by 6 p.m. and couldn't leave until 6 a.m. The schedule was posted publicly. Seal would be there every night, same time, same place, for 180 nights. Colombian assassins later testified it took them 3 days to find the halfway house and 2 days to plan the hit. They could have done it faster, but they wanted to be thorough. January 1986. The FBI warned of specific threats against Seal. 3 Colombian nationals had entered the U.S. through Mexico with false papers. Intelligence indicated they were Medellín sicarios. The DEA pleaded with Polozola to modify the sentence, let Seal serve it at home or in protective custody, but Polozola refused. He later claimed, "I wasn't informed of any specific, credible threat," things which the FBI disagrees with. Agent Lloyd Cravens testified he personally delivered a threat assessment to Polozola's clerk on January 15, 1986. It stated that the assassination probability was very high, and his recommended action was an immediate relocation. February 8, 1986. Seal met with his DEA handlers for the last time. He gave them a briefcase containing his personal papers and $150,000 in cash. "For my kids," he said, because he knew this was a when, not if. Agent Jacobson tried once more to convince him to run. Seal's response was, "Where would I go that $1 million wouldn't find me? At least here I'm on home turf." But he was wrong. The killers had been watching him for 6 days. They knew he arrived between 5:45 and 6 p.m. They knew he parked in the same spot. They knew he carried guns but kept them holstered while walking from his car. They even knew he stopped at the same Texaco station for coffee. How many seconds would Barry Seal live after stepping out of his Cadillac on February 19th? And which government agency would later be accused of orchestrating his murder to silence what he knew about their operations? February 19, 1986, 4:47 p.m. Miguel Velez, Luis Quintero Cruz, and Bernardo Antonio Vasquez met at the Belmont Hotel on Airline Highway. They loaded their MAC-10 submachine guns, 30-round magazines of 45 ACP hollow points. At 5:15 p.m., they drove a stolen 1981 Buick Regal to the halfway house parking lot. Velez positioned himself behind a green dumpster, 8 feet from Seal's usual parking space. Quintero Cruz crouched behind a Plymouth Voyager. Vasquez stayed in the Buick, engine running. At 5:52 p.m., Seal's white Cadillac turned into the lot. What happened next took 6 seconds. Seal put the car in park. His hand moved toward the briefcase on his passenger seat. It contained federal grand jury testimony scheduled for next week. Velez stepped out and fired first. The MAC-10's rate of fire is 1,200 rounds per minute. In 2 seconds, he emptied half his magazine through the driver's side window. 15 bullets hit Seal, 5 in the head, 4 in the chest, 6 in the arms as he tried to shield himself. Quintero Cruz fired simultaneously from the passenger side, adding 12 more rounds. Seal's body convulsed with each impact. Blood sprayed across the windshield, the dashboard, the cream leather seats. His Motorola pager, still clipped to his belt, buzzed with a message from his DEA handler. "Call immediately. This is urgent." But it was too late. The assassins sprinted to the Buick. Vasquez floored it, tires screaming. They made it 3 blocks before abandoning the car. Police sirens were already approaching. A witness, Harvey Dixon, had been fixing his truck nearby. He saw everything and chased the killers on foot until they disappeared into a drainage canal. By 6:03 p.m., 11 minutes after the shooting, Baton Rouge police had surrounded the halfway house. Detective Michael Deutsch found Seal slumped sideways, his head resting on the center console. The engine was still running. Classical music played softly on the radio, Vivaldi's Four Seasons, Winter Movement. Seal's .45 remained holstered. He never had time to reach for it. Within 4 hours, police arrested all 3 assassins. They hadn't even left Baton Rouge. Quintero Cruz was caught at a Greyhound station trying to buy a ticket to Miami. Velez was found hiding in a motel room, still wearing blood-spattered clothes. Vasquez, the driver, turned himself in after seeing his photo on the news. Under interrogation, they immediately confessed. This wasn't their first assassination, and they seemed proud of their efficiency. The trial lasted 8 days. The evidence was overwhelming. Eyewitness testimony, fingerprints on the abandoned Buick, and the murder weapons found in a storm drain. All 3 received life sentences without parole. But during testimony, Velez made a curious statement. "We were told the American government wanted him dead too. They promised to make no investigation." Was this cartel bravado or something darker? Declassified documents from 1995 revealed Barry Seal had flown weapons to the Contras on his return trips from Nicaragua, the same operation Oliver North managed. Seal knew which U.S. officials authorized cocaine trafficking to fund black operations. He had names, dates, and Swiss bank account numbers. Former DEA agent Celerino Castillo later testified, Barry Seal was killed because he knew too much about the CIA's drug running. And this was the moment everyone knew that the cartel pulled the trigger, but the CIA gave the loaded gun. The CIA denies involvement, and the official story remains that Pablo Escobar ordered the hit and the cartel executed it. But federal investigators found something odd. The assassin's motel room had been paid for with a credit card traced to a defunct CIA front company. February 21, 1986. 2,000 people attended Seal's funeral at Green Oaks Memorial Park. The DEA sent a wreath, but the CIA sent no one. His widow, Debbie, received a letter from an anonymous sender containing $250,000 in bearer bonds and 2 words, "Stay quiet." But she never did. In 1997, she filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the CIA, alleging they deliberately exposed her husband. The case was dismissed on national security grounds. Pablo Escobar celebrated Seal's death with a party at Hacienda Nápoles, without knowing that 7 years later, Colombian National Police would gun down Escobar on a Medellín rooftop, using intelligence that originated from Barry Seal's testimony. The cocaine kept flowing. Other pilots replaced Seal within weeks. The Medellín route shifted to Mexico, creating the Sinaloa cartel. By 1990, more cocaine entered America than when Seal was flying. The war on drugs had claimed its star witness and accomplished nothing. But Barry Seal wouldn't be the last man to die after threatening to expose government secrets. 35 years later, another American who claimed to have dirt on federal agencies would be found dead in a Spanish prison cell, hours after tweeting, "If I suicide myself, I didn't."